This program is brought to you by Emory University.
We are here in early April in the ravine in the middle of the Emory University campus, and we've had the pleasure of the company of George Trakas here all week. And we're conducting this creativity conversation, which is part of a university-wide series that have been in public and private places all across the campus, but I don't think we've ever done one in a ravine before. So that makes it very special, but they've included scientists like E.O. Wilson and composers and poets, and so it's great to have you as part of this campus-wide creativity conversation. George Trakas initially came to Emory back in 1979 when you were invited here to be part of a major symposium celebration of Phi Beta Kappa Symposium on Intellect and the Imagination. And your work was commissioned to be part of that symposium. And so I'd just like you to talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you. Had you heard of Emory? Did you know about Emory before you came? And did you have any concept of what you were about to enter into?
I'd heard of Emory, but I really didn't know really very much about it. However, close friends of mine, actually they became close because of the symposium. John Howitt and in the art history department, and Clark Poling had recommended me to the symposium committee to possibly do something, an art intervention during the symposium. And they flew me down here in April before the September symposium to meet the committee.
So this time of year?
Yes. And I showed them slides of my work, and I looked around the campus. I'd read all the papers, or some of the papers, and the outline of the theme of the symposium. And I really proposed, I said I'd like to do something on the Quai that relates to the pine tree, because there was a very large pine tree there at the time. And so I had three axes pointing to that in dialogue with the flagpole and the flag, not certainly contrary to that. And I also said I thought it would be very important to make access to this, what I thought was a tremendous resource on the university grounds that really coupled, I thought, well, to bring some of the scholars down to the source, water, the ravine, but also down into this this ravine, which on the Hordenbossel plan was really the wild, the unkept, chaotic wild that you enter under the old gate and go across the bridge, which is in view here, to the quad and to the sacred sanctuary of learning. And I said, in those days, that was the concept. But today, the environment is something that we need to refocus on. And I thought it would be important to bring the scholars, or at least have the scholars come down here and recognize this as an important part of the symposium, at least to keep it in dialogue with all the other subjects. And they said, sure. So I came down 3 weeks before the symposium and built the quad work, and then made access here, which is very modest. It's just a wooden plank walk down to the ravine on one side, steel walk with a staircase coming down from the museum side. And it's been here since '79. I came and made it more permanent in '84, and here we are again.
Absolutely. And how much of a concept did you have of this before? Is it just something that emerged once you saw the ravine itself? Did that direct you, or did you have any kind of preconceived ideas?
I really didn't have any preconceived structure or shape or anything. I just saw the ravine. The years before that, I'm kind of known to make access to inaccessible places, and to also to places that people just consider derelict, neglected, and not worth going to. And since I like kind of being a scout and surveying things, but here it was essentially quite quickly conceived and sited, because you have the old bridge, and I started on one side of the bridge for one access, the other side of the bridge for the other. So people crossing the bridge could actually take a different route. It took a little more time, but basically the contrast between taking the bridge or coming down here to the ravine and going back to the other side, it gets you to the other side of the bridge, and it's a much fuller experience. It's kind of, you take your own initiative to take this little kind of precarious walk And on that, you reflect about yourself, your body. It's a certain physical engagement with the structure, but also in the presence of this magnificent canopy and trees and basically native forest and plants. So, and always the running stream, which has its own source. So it's quite an extraordinary place, and I still love it 32 years later.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
We love it too. And the name for it, source root, is that a name that just emerged in a very natural way from your process, or does it have any particular derivation?
Well, the original titles were the quad piece and the gulch piece. This was called the gulch. And but as it became kind of established in the dialogue of both the symposium and after, because this was kept here, long after the symposium,
Right.
people kept asking me for a title for both works, and the work on the quad became the quad pine, and this became source root, essentially saying that it's the root that leads you down to the source. And the source is of intellect, of nature, but also of us emerging from water. So there are many different levels and parallels, or at least implications with the use of source and root. Root also being R-R-O-T, but it's actually spelled R-O-U-T-E, but it also has that connection, that phonetic connection with the root of a tree and the root of our ancestries, etc.
And when you initially created this work, were you working out here by yourself, or did you have other people who also were working or contributed to it?
Well, that's, I think, a very important and good question, because when I proposed this to the symposium committee, they liked the concept, building something focusing on the pine and the quad and relative to the pine tree, to the flagpole, and the idea of coming down to the ravine in context to the symposium, engaging nature in the dialogue. But I don't think they had any idea that it was going to be built. They just liked the concept. Well, 3 weeks before early September of 1979, I drove down from New York in my old red Dodge pickup truck with my welder and all my equipment, and pretty much set up on the quad with my truck. And went to local suppliers and got pipes, and it happened quite quickly. I was very neat every day. I didn't have tools lying all over. My truck was my toolbox, and my presence up there 3 weeks before the symposium was, students kind of loved it. I was always in dialogue with theology students or art history students. John Cowett and Clark Poling brought students, and so it was, up there on the quad was this worker with his truck. And doing things for the symposium was about to happen, but students really weren't familiar with the whole thing. And so that was excellent. And the symposium committee we had no idea who's actually going to build something, mix concrete and weld and everything on the quad, but it soon picked up.
Did you get committee approvals?
It was kind of one at a time. Bob DeHaan was, very positive, totally intrigued, was a little nervous because he was the chair. But ultimately, by the time the symposium started happening, because of all the dialogue I had with people, it was almost like an introduction to the symposium. And similarly with this here, basically, once that was done, I parked up there and brought my cables down, went to local, everything was local material, and everything was built here. Mixed my own concrete and everything. In terms of help, I did not have a contractor. I had a limited budget. I'm familiar with doing this kind of work, and I love doing it. So it went pretty well. I was much younger, 32 years younger, and I was very challenged by being included in this symposium. And so I was really out to do an efficient and good job. And I was also available, obviously, for dialogue and going to some of the delivery of the papers, etc., of the other, members of the symposium. And it was a very intense time and a really wonderful time. And President Laney was the one who initiated it, and Bob DeHaan chaired it. And I was very happy to have been part of it and very happy to be back, and extraordinarily thrilled to be able to come back in May and be part of commencement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that as well. And that opportunity for you to receive an honorary degree really was what inspired this return, and
Yeah.
refurbishment, I guess. And so when you originally created this piece, and then you worked on it again, and you said in 1984.
Right.
Did you have a concept about, or a guess, or a hunch about what would happen to it over time?
Well, most of my work is work sensitively in nature, but nature has her own power and force. One of the things that happened when I came back, or at least when I was in touch with Renee Stein, who's a restorer for the museum, and Elizabeth Horner, is I asked them for, as soon as possible, photographs of the existing condition. And my impression was that this staircase had probably washed away. It was downstream. And I asked Renee, I said, can you kind of walk downstream and see where the staircase might be, so that we can possibly retrieve it, or at least we can get rid of it, because if it's trashing up the ravine. And she took photographs, and I saw it in the photographs and was quite amazed. However, the wooden walk on the Cannon Chapel side, the end of it was hanging up about 30 inches off the ground, because the stream has eroded a whole sandbank, a kind of beach over there. And so since I've been back, I've modified that in respect of the stream and Mother Nature, and I've made a little staircase that when you get to the end of the plank walk, you take a staircase down. And I love that kind of modification, because now it makes the same relationship, kind of similar relationship of when you come down this walk, then you take these stairs, and the staircases kind of gyrate your hips, and it's a whole different, you're actually going down in this different plateaus down into the water. Originally, the stream would come down and go around this huge rhododendron, and the stream actually went underneath the staircase and it went that way. And the walk was that, so that you actually could step. This was kind of on this sand beach that went up to the bank there. And so it's changed, and I kind of love the aspect that when you come down this one, you have to get on. We put these stepping stones in yesterday, that you actually get practically right in the water and have to cross. So it's yet a changed experience over time. I did not bring Mother Nature back to what she was. I've kind of worked with what she's done, and it's been fulfilling and a learning process doing it.
And so what is our responsibility, both those of us who are here now and those members of the community who are here in the future, to, as guardians of this work and of this space, is it something that we just let shift and change over time? And you won't always be in a position where you can come back.
Right.
And how do we respect the work as well as the natural surroundings?
Well, the most important thing is to keep the ravine the ravine. I think that's the most. I mean, this work was a tool for the symposium. It brought people down here and made them realize, my God, this is a huge resource. This is really part of the symbol of learning, and it's actually a seed of learning. It's kind of a platform to look at carefully. And environmental studies and the environment, especially today, and it will increase in time because the population of the world is something that we have to very carefully look at. The work itself, in a sense, has really served its purpose. And but at the same time, I don't think huge concrete paths or asphalt paths should be made through it, as we've discussed this past week. That it should be kept intimate. And the work itself, with the huge storm we had last Monday night, huge trees went down on the other side of the bridge that they're chipping now. I really do have to tell you that, there's a pine tree here, an immense pine tree that was there when I first came. It towers above this telephone pole with some cross tees on it and insulators that was, installed here, I think, way back in the 20s. They're important aspects of the ravine, and particularly my work, because I like to show that nature is really dominant. However, if that pine tree comes down, if this other tree that was here actually in 70 come down, it's going to radically change the environment. Now, I know that the pine tree will be chipped. You can't grow, plant another pine tree, but those are things that might happen. And the work itself is very modestly built, and doesn't take a whole lot to restore it to what it is, but there are changes that might have to be done. If this gets, crushed and has to be rebuilt, it's totally doable, but the cost of doing it is not exorbitant.
Right.
It's not like building a new building or anything. Might happen, but to some extent, I accept that it's really very pleased that it's served its role to place a certain really important value to the university in focus. And in a sense, I really built it as temporary. And when you're in this environment where nature is very powerful, you can't be too precious about the materials. Now, the planks on the woodwalk have been replaced twice. It was replaced in '91 and again in '97. I spoke to James Johnson in the physical plant. We actually, Renee Stein and him and I walked it when I first came on Monday. And I told him what I wanted to do. And I said, do we replace all the planks? He said, no, they're in good shape. So if something does, I'm confident that if something does rot out and needs changing, you can do it. The physical plant can do it. And I'm still around, God knows how long, but the experience of me being here and the solutions I've made, which James and the physical plant people have watched me do it. I haven't asked them for anything except help with transporting some of these rocks from the Briarcliff campus. I think reinforces and gives them confidence about what the work is, because I came and did it myself. And it encourages them, let's try to keep this thing going here, and if something rots out. So I'm confident that the community will take care of it, but it's not like a precious thing, is from my point of view, and it's not like an etching or a painting or a sculpture in a museum that gets damaged. I mean,
And it will inevitably change over time because of...
Well, this can't last forever. And I don't expect it to be cast in bronze, and, it might have to change. Maybe it'll decide, well, the walk should go further down or something. But my feeling is that, I really accept what Emory decides at this point. I'm delighted and very pleased to come down here for this week to restore it, to work with it, with the staff, museum staff and physical plant, and to come back in May to accept this honor, this honorary doctorate, and thereafter, we just have to see what Mother Nature decides. She gave us a reprieve
Absolutely.
On Monday, because if all these trees had come down, it would have been a big change. But
so you've mentioned several times the role of the community in your work. For example, when you were working on the quadrangle, the community. This week, we've had students from visual arts and environmental studies participate in your process. You've had a lot of discussions with bystanders and wayfarers along the way and people that you met in earlier times here. And so have you always seen yourself as kind of a community artist, that your work is informed by, influenced by, and connection to the community? Because we often think of artists as people who are more isolated.
Well, in my case, the most important thing, and the starting point, is the environment, is the place where I'm going to work. And very often I do work, as I mentioned earlier, in these kind of make access to these abandoned, neglected spaces that are basically always in a community. And and I'm careful to propose things that I know will work for the community. And in the case of Emory and the symposium, and beyond the symposium, well, initially the symposium, because I thought it was important to bring the scholars down here to show them that here we are in the wild. How do we factor this into the dialogue and the presuppositions of intellectual inquiry and imagination and neural circuitry and social connections and transcending limits in the arts and the sciences? And the selection of a site and the site itself, though, is the crux. I mean, that's the beginning of it. Right. I don't think, what does the community need? What kind of shape? What kind of color? It's not about that. It's really about my sensitivity and caring for revealing something really special in a community. And I felt this was very special and should be focused on for the symposium, but I thought thereafter also. Because when I started working on it, people were like, totally like, what are you doing going down there? There are vipers and, and snakes and scorpions and all the rest. It was to them what it was always, the chaos and the wildness of nature. Does not factor into learning and scholarship and all that. It was starting in obviously before pre-79, but the EPA, was already in motion. Rachel Carson's writings and her influence on thinking was major. But here was something completely contrary. Many birds, silent springs definitely, very bubbling springs. In terms of the community, the great luxury is to be able to come back here 32 years later and we're sitting on something I built 32 years ago, and it's still here.
And also something that's become such a meaningful part of the community, both
yes,
for individuals and the campus.
But it's not a stadium. The football team doesn't come down here, and that's another important fact. It's an intimate place that we don't want to, broadcast. The departments know about it. Certain faculty members know about it. The people in religion, Gene Bianchi called me, the other day, and we met. He said he brought a lot of classes to meditate down here. David Blumenthal, also in theology, came down. I'm meeting with Bob DeHaan, who's in anatomy, and he was chairman. They know of it. They come down with their families and their kids and their grandkids. But it's not something you want to have the whole, on visiting day or on commencement, have everybody come down here. It's not about that.
Right.
It's an intimate place that, people come upon by accident.
So how did your connection to nature in this way, and the connection between nature and art, how did that develop for you? Is this something that has always been a part of you, or is it something that you learned or studied, or have your ideas about this changed in any significant way over time?
Well, artists and scientists, initially delve into a certain subject and then fall in love with a very focused subject. And in my case, as an artist, and early in my career, even when I was a student, I studied chemistry and mathematics and geology, particularly geology, because I think, I've always loved rocks. I've always loved the contours of landscapes. I've always liked road cuts, etc. And as a sculptor, rock is our source, in a sense, a source of construction, a source of shaping things. And so also, it was difficult for me. I love museums, and I go to museums. I go to museums to look at landscape paintings. I love the way artists takes us into a landscape with a little road or a stream coming toward the, in the painting. And I just basically wanted to create the same thing, but in reality, So these little diagonal paths that lead prospectively down into this area, is a kind of enticement. I don't like there to be big plaques that say, artwork, don't touch. It's not definitely about touching and walking and using.
We can sit on it. We can
We
walk
can sit on it. We can walk. Mother Nature can splash all over it and go over it. The moonlight, the sunlight, different climates. I just love that I'm able to build things that Mother Nature and nature in general just completely interacts with, and in some cases become habitats. I built things on shorelines that originally were, exposed to the elements, and create these works that then become habitats for muskrats and for crabs and fish and spawning and all that. That can't happen in a storage room at a museum, right. And it's not really sellable in a gallery, which is another issue. How do I make a living doing this?
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
I've taught. I've always encouraged artists to have a trade, so I worked as a carpenter, an electrician, plumber in my early years to support myself, and then slowly got commissions and started teaching, and I taught for years, but it gave me time to do my work. And now I just basically am commissioned to do very large public works, and that's what I'm doing right now. And coming here is a great luxury to repair something I built so long ago that still exists, in a community that really appreciates it. It's it's thrilling.
So where did this work fit in your corpus of works? I mean, where were you in your career when you did this work, and what has transpired since then?
Well, the first the first public commission I did outside was for a show called Projects in Nature. It was in 1975 in New Jersey, and it got a lot of press, and it got me to Germany. A curator from Germany got to Germany and built a big work there, and that was in '77. And then I came here, and that helped the concept of that, of working in this Baroque park, a very ambitious, long, very large piece that related to a big space. Again, got a lot of press, and that began, I think, tweaked the interest of John Howitt and Clark Poling because of my relationship, the work with a historical context to the actual site.
Right.
And they said, this guy's articulate, this guy can build, and I think he should come down here to look at the space and see what he can do and present it to us, and to see if we want to build it. And so
we have some travelers coming
okay, I think
through.
we're going to have to
Yeah.
get up here. Yes, oh, not at all. This is actually terrific little...
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt.
thank
Have
you.
you been
No,
down
this
there
is great.
No, ma'am.
Uh-huh.
No, ma'am. It's the first time.
So have you met the artist before?
No, ma'am.
How do you do?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, very well, thanks. Hi.
I'm Kenneth Playford, by the way.
Oh, George.
Nice
George
to meet you.
Trakas.
Nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Jordan.
This is awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
thank you. Wonderful to see you down here.
Well, sorry to interrupt your little
No,
story.
this is
glad
great.
you did.
Actually, it's a...
That's exactly the purpose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too.
So we were talking
Well, that
about,
was fortuitous.
yeah, absolutely. That's the idea.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
the idea.
So we were talking about where you were in your career as an artist when you did this, and then since then you've gone on to also to kind of major installations,
Right.
of very
Yeah.
dramatic sizes and scales.
Well, from '77 after Germany, after doing work in Documenta in Kassel, being invited to participate in a symposium of the caliber that was planned here was a huge confidence booster for me. And it also reaffirmed my inclusion of many different facets of site, community, and in this case the community was, scholars and different departments, theology, physics, neurocircuitry, sociology. It was huge for me.
Right,
Artists, a museum, somebody comes by, sees your work, likes the work, puts you on a museum show, but to be included in this was huge for me. And
So kind of changed your self-concept
Well,
of yourself.
yeah,
and
it
your
just, yeah, that is, the artwork is not just art, but it's something that gets factored into a dialogue of natural sciences and pure sciences and philosophy, literature, film, and that they included the kind of work I do, which is environmental sculpture, in context of that symposium, was a huge reinforcer for me. And so from there I said, I'm just going to stick to what my goals are. I'm not going to try to modify or compromise my goals and my thoughts in doing my work to try and get a market to sell in a gallery, or et cetera, et cetera. So.
We have another
Oh, great,
visitor
terrific.
coming through.
And it does add the element of sound,
Yeah.
which is important.
So it really engages all of your senses.
Yes. Hi.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm not the only one who finds this place peaceful.
Yeah, I mean, this is these interventions of people coming through. It's almost choreographed.
Absolutely.
It's perfect. The couple came up that way, and he came down that way.
So speaking
So
of
this is an important part of this whole conversation about creativity.
absolutely, and speaking of choreography, you mentioned the other night when you were talking to the environmental studies students that you see yourself in a way as a choreographer.
Yes, well, I'm sure it's caught on film because that guy that just came down did a kind of dance.
So, and a choreographer in that, as you mentioned earlier, we're required, our bodies are required to move and shift and kind of become part of the work.
Well, initially, people, when they, either side, look down at this little catwalk, the mind says, I'm not sure I can do it, it looks precarious. The body has got much more confidence because it's our physical aspect. Says, come on, give it a try. And, most people take one step. The mind says, you did it, okay. The body says, let's try another one. And soon after that initial kind of stop, it puts your body in touch with your mind in touch with your body, And that's important. The figure in sculpture particularly is, the main thing. And in my case, it's your figure that is worked with. And so I put you in touch with, with your own figure, with your own body, with its movements. And at the same time, these are not complicated things to take. You begin to see yourself, it's a question of is space and time. It's not like looking at a painting, it just stays there. It's about taking the initiative to actually do this, and in the process, things are revealed. And that changes day to day. I mean, you can come down in sunlight in the morning one way, and then at a certain temperature, when there's no rain and the water's flowing the way it is, you come down after a rain, the water's gushing through, the color is different. These are all important factors, but it also affects how you move and what you do with it. So this, the sensitivity of the body and the mind and how they interplay with each other on the works are a real key factor.
Seems really especially important on a university campus to have that engagement and not feel the duality that we sometimes experience or think that are part of our nature, but rather to have those more integrated.
It also, in a sense, the scale of it, it kind of transcends rules. It's not quite legal. Because of the limits I had in terms of budget when I built it. The works I build now are all ADA accessible.
Right.
And but in this particular case, it isn't. And I don't think that's a hindrance. However, it is an important factor in modern environmental work that the handicapped are totally made accessible, at least with all the projects I do. You cannot get federal funding for any kind of project that I do without addressing that issue.
Do you have a favorite time of day for this work now that you've been here again all week that really feels that it's especially compelling to you, that when you see it you say, oh yes, this is what I had in mind, this is what I wanted?
Well, I work, start out in the morning when in this particular case the east is over there and it's usually cool, especially after the storm is very cool, and the light, from sun up comes up and goes down and then arcs in the sky, and then toward the end of the day in the west it comes down this way. So I have the luxury of being able to be on a site for a long time from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Not everybody does that. So I particularly enjoy from morning till night being on a site. Most people can't do that. They're on their way to school or they have classes or, so that's a big difference. As a worker, I tend to be here, and being back for a week to be able to experience that is very fulfilling.
So you like the full array?
Yes, and this, down here, it's warm. You don't have, back up in the northeast and in other sites, it's very cold. There's ice. There's big slabs of ice on the river. There are tides. And in the summertime, it can get very hot. And when you're welding and doing that kind of work, so you have to pace yourself. Sometimes I have to get up at a certain hour to get on a job when the low tide is at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I can only work on certain things when it's very low tide. So I really have always worked with the rhythm of Mother Nature and also the cycle of the day and the sun in the day. And in the sky, I love doing my work, and I am managing to get a lot of work doing it, relating to that. So, but I'm very sensitive to works being able to function at all times of the day. In this case, at night, although I have heard that there was a gentleman yesterday that says he often comes down here at night. It's a very important, and he comes across here. But I don't encourage it. But well, there's a new moon now, but I would probably wait for 8 days or something when the full moon. It must be quite beautiful down here in the full moon.
Well, even when you come back at a month from now, there'll be a change in the foliage, the environment, the air, all of that will have changed just in a very short time.
Yes.
And what about, do you have a spot here that you feel is kind of at the center of it for you?
Here we are. We're sitting. Here we are sitting with our feet in the stream. That's what it's about. I mean, the magic of just the water now. This is just the source, the stream source up on the other side of Woodruff. Actually, I think it's under dormitories that comes through culverts and comes down here. But just that gentle movement of water is really, that's the real source. H2O, you know, in all its different facets.
That's the source.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is, you know, it's getting, you know, in a sense, you know, the triangle that's created by the paths and the bridge and coming down into Mother Nature's cleft, you know, with all the foliage and everything, it's a very feminine place, you know,
Right.
and so, you know, that's also a source. I mean, it's where we all come from. And so this is in a much larger context. But it's interesting. Last night somebody came up, because I'd mentioned this in a lecture, and she said, you know, in birthing, you know, the water breaks, right? And then we come out. And that was great. I never thought of that. It's kind of get the waterfall and the sound, okay, here I come. You know? So yeah, I'm very sensitive to that, and I consider water to be a feminine element, and you know, the oceans and their wildness and their profundity, and they're really still very mysterious terrain. But this is part of that. You know, this flows ultimately into the ocean, and that's another important connection. Although I don't bring it up that much, but I'm glad you answered the question. I could think about it.
Well, you know, you were said just a minute ago that the student mentioned the birth process and the water breaking, and you hadn't really thought of that in relationship to this work or maybe your other work before. So it's almost as if once you create the work, then you also learn from it.
Yes, yeah, particularly here at Emory, because everyone is so open and curious, and their pace is slower than, well, not slower, it's just more intense or something. But since I've been here this week, the dialogues I've had with people from way back from the symposium, but also new people, younger people, students, Renee, yourself, Elizabeth Horner, who was actually here in '79 and actually babysat for my daughter in the art history building when it was in the Quonset huts. It's been very rich, but the incidents of that student last night coming up and asking, you know, and making that comment, it's just fulfilling, and that's the luxury of being able to work at a place like Emory, be invited to lecture and have that interface after 32 years, that it's still alive, is very fulfilling.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's extremely meaningful to us to have you here. George, you've been referred to as an artist of place, and I hope you have a sense that this place is our place, all of our place, and certainly your place as well.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad it's become a kind of place where people love to come to and relax and learn from.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And thanks for this conversation.
Yes, and thank you.
Yeah, it's great having you
Thank
here.
you and the Emory community.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.